I really appreciate Madonna. Now, that sentence has probably never been uttered in a sermon before now, but I do. I appreciate Madonna, at least for this reason. She's honest. Right? When she says we are living in a material world, and I am a material girl. I mean, that's honesty, and I appreciate her honesty. So can we be honest for a moment? Because we do live in a world that is addicted to having more and more. We are obsessed with getting the new and improved whatever. We're fixated on the next thing to call my own. We are indeed living in a material world, and we are all material people. Now, okay, today's sermon is basically about how we all, as a society and individually, are always craving the new, the better, the more. We are a consumerist culture. And I'm guessing you've probably heard a sermon or two or a lesson on this, on how we spend too much. We're always chasing after the next thing. And what usually happens after that sermon or lesson about how we spend too much is, well, we all leave feeling a little guilty. And we might tell ourselves, oh, we'll do better. But that resolution fades by the time we get to the restaurant after worship. Because I'll tell you, I don't think guilt works very well. So, up front, I'm going to tell you, my intention today is to not make you feel guilty. Okay? I'm not here to make you feel guilty. There's probably a time for a sermon about how our consumerism hurts the global poor. There's probably a sermon for our purchasing and buying habits widens the gap between the rich and the poor, and how our consumerism leads to crippling debt, and how it is ravaging God's good creation. But I'm not here to make you feel guilty. That was a joke. Oh. See how I did there? What I did there? Made you feel guilty, but said I wasn't? Yeah. But my intention, seriously, is to not make you feel guilty. I want to talk about this incessant need for new and better and more. Not to make us feel, but because I think it is robbing us of the good life. It is robbing us of joy. The world offers us a panoply of things through which we can orient our lives, things to chase after, things to pursue, things claiming that they will make us happy and fulfilled if only we will consume. Right? There's the new stuff, the new thing that comes out. Oh, it's now the iPhone 17. I got to get that one. And no, the iPhone 17 is not out, so you can calm down. Okay, you didn't miss out. Sometimes it's the new stuff. Maybe it's selling us more experiences that we can have, or better bodies, or more knowledge, or the next post or video to take in. There's always something else, and it's promising us to make us whole. But it comes up short. Now, I love how James K. Smith puts this when he thinks about how our desires are drawn to the next new thing. He says, to be human is to be animated and oriented by some vision of the good life, some picture of what we think counts as flourishing. That is what it means to be human. Okay? And we want that. And we crave that. We desire it. A vision of the good life. And we adopt ways of life that are indexed to such visions of the good life. Not usually because we think through our options, but rather because some picture captures our imagination. We all desire the good life. The question is, what vision of the good life are we oriented toward? How did we get it? And so as Smith says there, the real power of creating a desire for the new, better, and more is that it goes beyond convincing us intellectually that we need them. The world sells us a vision of the good life not through argument, but by appealing to our desires. This is why advertising is so ubiquitous in our culture. Advertising is not about promoting a product, but about shaping our desires. All of them. That's why advertising is so good. It appeals to us emotionally, psychologically, carnally, sensually, imaginatively. They're very good at what they do. As Eve Pohl says in her book, Buying God, the advertisers have started off simply presenting pictures of the product they wanted you to buy, but have migrated towards a highly successful strategy that involves showing you who you could become if you invest in their product. First, by the use of aspirational models, and laterally through celebrity endorsement. Advertising doesn't convince us of the efficacy or the utility of what they are selling. Give us a vision of what we could become. Only we will consume it. I don't know if you noticed what that quote there. That, to me, it seemed very clear that she's right what she wrote last Sunday during the Super Bowl. I don't know if you like me, but when we were watching, we actually commented as we were watching the Super Bowl, right? Because we all watched the Super Bowl mainly for the commercials. That's been the case for years now, especially when those two teams are playing this Sunday. So I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Not really kidding. But we watched the commercials. Why? Because these advertisers put all their money and energy into making these Super Bowl commercials. But what we noticed this past Sunday was how 20 years ago, there was some great writing in the commercials. But now, maybe a couple chuckles here and there. But what was almost every commercial doing? They put a celebrity in it. Didn't really say anything about a product. Didn't even come up with a great story or narrative in the commercial to make us laugh. Just said, here's somebody famous, buy our product. Maybe you could be like that. This is what advertising has become. Look what you could become. Only you will ensue. We're always being sold a vision of the good life. But our culture is not selling a product or an experience. It is selling us the next thing. It's always the next thing. And it is selling us a promise that the next thing will make you happy. The next thing will fulfill you. The problem is that it's an empty promise. I want to read one more quote here, and it's a long quote, but it captures what I'm trying to say so well. So bear with me. Let's really pay attention to this quote. It summarizes the problem here that we're all facing. Philip Kennison writes, and because advertising cultivates the insatiable desire for the new, the improved, the bigger and better, we find ourselves all but incapable of experiencing joy and contentment in our everyday lives. The threat to joy posed by the more is always better conviction is obvious. If more is always better, that there is little reason to be thankful for or content with what one presently has. The assumption is that one will be more happy and more content in the future because one will have more. But once this conviction is established, there is no logical stopping point where one will finally be content at all. For one would always be happier one had. The result is that whatever joy and contentment we might experience and express in the present are endlessly deferred. When it comes to consumerism, we are all Sisyphus. So what do we do in the face of a culture that tells us to get more, buy more, want more? Often we think there are only two responses to this craving and desiring for new, for better, for more. We often say, well, there's two ways to respond. The first is to give in and just play the game, or be ignorant of the game and get played. Either way, put your head down and keep pursuing the next thing. That's one option. Or the other option seems to be, well, deny yourself of all that which you desire, give up everything. In the Christian tradition, we would call this asceticism. Or we might say it's about self-denial. Deny your desire. Now, granted, I think it's sometimes, maybe that's a good way to get started if you want to curb your pursuit of the next thing. But I don't think those are the only two options. I think there is a third option. There's a third way. And that is, instead of giving in to our desires or denying our desires, what if we sought to transform our desires? What if we could actually desire less? What if we wanted less and lived accordingly? What if we lived as if we already had enough? This is what Christians have called the practice of simplicity. Simplicity is not going without. It is not a vow of poverty. It is a way of life that says, I don't need the next thing. I'm not craving or longing for the next thing. I'm content with what I've been given. I have enough. And if the next thing comes my way, I will receive it as a gift. So there's this great song I want to tell you about. It's sung actually during the Jewish holiday of Passover. Okay, every year, right? Jews gather together, celebrate God delivering Israel from Egypt. They commemorate the Passover meal. And Jews, during the celebration each year, they will sing songs together during this celebration. And there's one song that they sing that is so fascinating to me. The song is called The Yenu. You actually should check it out sometime, and there you can find it online. The Yenu. It's actually quite a mover and a shaker, that song. But the Yenu, the name of the song, it means literally, it would have been enough. The Yenu, it would have been enough. And the song is 15 stanzas. And each stanza talks about something God did, and then says, but if that's all God would have done, the Yenu. So, for example, here's how it begins, the first verse. If he had brought us out from Egypt and had not carried judgments against them, the Yenu, it would have been enough. For another one, it says, if he had split the sea for us and had not taken us through it on dry land, it would have been enough. If he had fed us manna and had not given us the Sabbath, it would have been enough. If he had brought us into the land of Israel and not built for us the holy temple, it would have been enough. What a great song. God has acted, and if it's all he did, it would have been enough. So simplicity, it might sound good, or maybe not. I don't know. But simplicity based on being able to say it would have been enough. Man, it sounds good. But here's the question. How do we get there? How do we get to a point of saying, oh, it's enough? How do we get there? Especially if we're talking about changing and transforming our desires. Right? Think about changing the very things we want and we crave and we long for in life. It's not realistic that we can just will ourselves to desire less. I'm not going to preach a sermon and you all go, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'll start doing that. It's not just deciding to live simply and then all of our longings for the new and better and more go away. Do we transform our desire so that we can experience joy? I've got an idea. We can cultivate gratitude. So our second practice that we're talking about, when we're thinking about where God is leading us, Bell's Church of Christ, to be able to love God and love others and make disciples, these 9 practices that we're preaching on, this second one, under love God, says, in a world drawn to newer, better, and more, following Jesus means cultivating gratitude, living simply. Now, you're gonna hear some stuff about how we're gonna cultivate gratitude, and if we can cultivate gratitude, hopefully that will lead to living simply, to simplicity. And we're going to do different things to be a people who cultivate gratitude. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to construct a gratitude wall in our church building so that as a community of faith, there is a place for us to consistently, frequently put up what we are grateful for. And maybe that sounds simple, but I am convinced that if a group of people can get together and practice gratitude, together can express all the good things they're grateful for, I think it's revolutionary. So we're going to construct this wall where we can say thank you. And we're going to do some other things as we move forward to try to get gratitude, not just something we do, something that is in our very bones. If we're going to cultivate gratitude, what we're mostly going to do is talk about grace. Because the key to cultivating gratitude is to pay attention to God's grace. Now, I talked about this months ago when I was preaching on communion. How we have this fascinating interplay of words in Greek that we see in the New Testament. All right, so if you'll put that next slide up there, we have these three words in Greek. And as you can see, if you look closely, they're very related. The first word, charis, means grace. This is the word for grace in Greek. But what's so fascinating is that in Greek, we don't, in the New Testament, I should say, it's not, oh, God is acting and God is gracious. Now that you should be grateful for that. No, it's in the very words of it. That the grace of God is inside the word for gratitude, for thanksgiving, Eucharistio. Grace leads to gratitude, which leads to joy. It's almost a formula. And no, life does not work out always by a formula. But man, there is something about this movement that as we pay attention to the grace of God, we will respond with the only way we can respond, which is gratitude. Then we might get to taste some joy. Now, you'll notice something as I wrap up this morning. I haven't read any scripture during this sermon, which feels very weird. It goes against my religion, right? Like I am taught, it's the text, it's the text, it's the text. And so I thought about, as I thought about preaching this sermon, like what text to use. And I'm looking around, I'm finding, here's a verse about grace of God and about gratitude and joy. And here's another verse about this, another verse. And I'm thinking, which verse do I use? Which verse should I read during the sermon? Finally, I decided I don't have to pick one verse to read, because the whole of Scripture is about God's grace. The whole thing. I love it how Cornelius Plantinga puts it in his book that I think is a great title, Cultivating Gratitude, Why Giving Thanks is the Key to Our Well-Being. And in talking about grace, he says, this one little word says practically the whole of the Christian religion. Christianity is a religion of God's grace, our gratitude. Or if I can quote somebody else that I've learned a lot from, my father-in-law, who's been a preacher for decades, who I've known now for 25 plus years, If you were to ask me, when you think of your father-in-law, Darren, what comes to mind? One sentence comes to my mind immediately. Because if you're around him for very long, you're going to hear him say this sentence. It's all about grace. So what I want to invite you to do this week. Last week, I invited you to spend 5 minutes each day being still and quiet in the presence of God, whatever that might look like. And I want to encourage you to keep doing that. Maybe if you can't start your day with those 5 minutes, just resting with God. But whenever you can do that, great. But I'd like to encourage you this week to invite you that at the end of the day, take a few minutes. And maybe you want to do it by yourself. Maybe you want to do it with others in your family, somebody else you love. Take a few minutes at the end of your day, each night. And I want you to think about and to reflect on the graces from your day. Where did you see God's grace today? And maybe it's in little things that we take for granted, like the food, the delicious food we ate. Maybe some experience you had. Maybe an encounter with somebody. Maybe it's just the amazing grace that you experience in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't know what it is, but I want you to list, reflect on the graces, and then I want you to pick one of them. I want you to give it some attention. I want you to focus on it. And I want you to really look at how whatever that is can only be because of the grace of God. And then I want you to say thank you for that grace. Because in the end, it's all about grace. And all is grace. Let's stand.